What is up, everybody? Welcome to Mad Blood. My name is Matt, and today I want to talk about the rise and fall of Alien, Aliens, and Alien 3. So, the Alien franchise, just in general, to me, is full of all kinds of twists and turns with the story and the lore. They take a lot of swings in this franchise, but specifically, I think the first three movies are very interesting to me with the different directors they chose, each movie taking place in the 70s, 80s, and then early 90s, which is interesting for the different tones and the different look of the movie and just the different feel of each movie in the first, three movies in the franchise. But yeah, it's an interesting aspect. There's a lot of ups and downs without a doubt. But let's get right into it and, of course, talk about the original Ridley Scott's Alien from 1979. So, of course, one of the most beloved, widely regarded, one of the greatest sci-fi horror movies ever made. A movie that I love, a movie with so much rewatchability for me and for so many reasons. And of course, we'll get into all that. But right away with Alien, the lingering shots, the music, it just puts you on this weird edge from the very beginning. It gives you this feeling of kind of what you're going to expect throughout the rest of the movie, and it doesn't really let up very much. To me, when I go back and watch Alien, I realize that there is this tone to it, this distrusting kind of a feeling when you watch the movie. They're telling you, basically, don't believe anything you're going to see because we're going to take you on a ride here that's going to surprise you throughout the movie. For example, look at it. I mean, it's just a normal, blue collar cargo vessel, right? This is going to be a standard operation. Nothing crazy is going to happen. Nope, definitely not. Oh, it's just a radio signal. It's probably no big deal. Let's go check it out. Nope. Ash, he's just another crew member. Nope, sure is not. And then even at the very end of the movie, when Ripley exhales, she's on the shuttle, she's getting the hell out of there. She's safe, right? Nope, she's not. Like I said, that continues throughout the story. But one thing that sticks out for me with Alien, every time I rewatch it, and to this day is one of the main things that I think about with this movie, is kind of just the look of this movie and also the feel of this movie. But specifically, I want to talk about the look of the movie, even just to the way the actors look. It's so blue collar, which I love. That's the thing I'm going to say throughout kind of talking about this movie. But the way the actors look, they don't look super put together. They look like a legitimate crew and a believable crew on a ship like this. You know what I mean? A crew that's been through some shit. A crew that's kind of tired of being here and doesn't really care all that much. You can almost smell the coffee and cigarettes in the air in this movie, which is a vibe that I love. I mean, all the way down to the padding on the seats in this ship, the padding on the walls, the way it's stitched. There's just something so great about it. And it just reminds me every time I watch Alien why I love sci-fi movies in this era. Yeah, I mean, shiny, polished movies in the Alien franchise and just in sci-fi movies in general can be fun, without a doubt. And I do love a lot of them. But this style of sci-fi just resonates with me specifically so damn deep, and I love it so much. And I mean, of course, we got to talk about Ripley in the original Alien. And I think one of the moments that kind of epitomizes what we love about Ripley's character and why she's become such a beloved character just in horror and sci-fi and all that in general is, after Kane goes onto the ship, there's some moments later on in that sequence when, and specifically kind of Ripley's tactful interaction with Ash that she has about the whole Kane incident. And this whole moment after Kane gets onto the ship with the face hugger, Ash, of course, lets Kane on, disobeying the commands of Ripley. And Ripley could just rip into his ass. But it shows her character. It shows her the leadership of her character, how tactful she is in that moment. She's just kind of outwits him at every turn in that moment. She says things like, "That's a pretty big risk for a science officer. Not exactly out of the manual, is it?" And things like that, I think, epitomizes and starts to kind of set the foundation for Ripley's character, which is so interesting to me. And I thought that was a pretty key moment in the movie that lets you know kind of what we're going to see later on in these three movies in some ways with Ripley's character. And that's a pretty good segue to talk about the cast in the original Alien. Of course, Sigourney Weaver playing Ripley in this movie. I will say a small little gripe I have with Ripley's character in the original Alien is she kind of gives you that vibe a little bit of like a goody two-shoes at times, like that, the kind of person that would maybe like not let you copy their homework before class in high school. A little bit of that, but overall, just an incredible character, iconic, an all-around badass. Of course, she's smart, she's resilient, and there's kind of like no fake BS with Ripley in this movie. Like, she's clearly terrified. We're not trying to like gloss over that, make it look fake, like, oh no, this doesn't bother me, all this crazy stuff going on. But regardless, she's terrified throughout the movie, but still pushes through all of it, is still able to kind of think on her feet in this movie, which is pretty much the complete opposite of Lambert's character in the movie. But, another character I want to point out, I mean, this cast is pretty stacked from top to bottom, but Ian Holm as Ash, like such a great, I guess you could say, villain in a way in this movie, plays that character so well, is so creepy. And every time I go back and rewatch this movie, I just think Ian Holm kills it in this movie. And you can see why he's gone on to do incredible things later on in his career as well. But now we need to talk about, of course, the chest burster scene. One of the most iconic scenes, you could argue, in movie history, definitely in horror history and definitely in sci-fi history. But yes, the chest burster scene, one of the most shocking moments that I'm sure people in the late 70s had ever seen in their entire life. But there's some things I want to point out here and some things that do stand out in that scene for me. I mean, right as Kane starts choking, I love the choice by Ridley Scott to kind of cut to Ash twice in that scene to show his like expressionless face, which is eerie and kind of hints of some things that are going to come later on in the movie with Ash's character. I love that aspect of it. And then, of course, like when the alien pops out, of course, this is late 70s. So, we don't have the greatest special effects, but I think in that scene, they still do a really damn good job when the alien does pop out. The alien, it pops out, it's all juicy. It's like slowly looking around the room in that kind of way. But when you look at that scene and you see Kane's hands just quivering, everything's almost silent. Clearly, everybody is in complete shock. There's just something about that and the way it's shot, the way it's pulled off with the practical effects. It's so eerie and creepy and scary. And even to this day, when I watch the entire franchise, it's one of those moments that still ages really, really damn well, of course. And next, to kind of fast forward a little bit to when Brett gets killed. Of course, Brett takes this little coolant shower thing and then gets slaughtered by the alien. And it's the first moment we get to see the alien in kind of the adult form ever in the franchise there. And that whole moment is hilarious to me. I mean, of course, like you get Jones just kind of staring at Brett as he's being massacred, like looking at Brett like, fucking idiot. That whole moment always sticks out to me as just a really damn funny moment in a overall horrifying movie for the most part. And then of course, as Ripley's starting to find out more and more of what's going on here, the movie kind of goes up another level in a way. Ripley goes straight to Mother because Ash is essentially giving her no information at all. And we get the new information from Mother about really what the plan is here and what's going on. And Mother says, ensure return of organism for analysis, all other considerations secondary, crew expendable. And Ripley, I don't necessarily want to say snaps, but she is sick of this shit and wants to eventually really just now find out what the hell is going on. And then eventually, of course, we get the iconic description from Ash of what this thing is. And it gives you another little hint on kind of Ash's plan here. He says, a perfect organism. Its structural perfection is matched only by its hostility. But I will say, a perfect organism? So yet it's taking a fucking nap later on in the movie when Ripley's trying to get away while its prey is essentially completely off guard? Perfect organism? I don't know about that, but we'll get more into that in a bit. But I will say with the movie, as this movie's building more and more and going back and rewatching it like I have so many times, every time I do think I wish the movie was just a little bit more gory. And I get it. the whole horror aspect, especially in the late 70s, movies like Halloween 1978, movies like this, so many other movies intentionally kind of didn't go that gory because that made you use your imagination a little bit more. But I do wish in Alien, there's a weird part of me that does wish that it was just a little bit more gory. I think the cutaways with the kills are a little quick for me, but that's kind of a nitpick without a doubt. But yes, of course, like Alien for a lot of people is considered Jaws in space, right? And to me, like, sure, I guess you could say Jaws in space in some ways, but I will say, to me, I think these things are a little bit more sneaky and a little bit more calculated than like a hungry great white shark to me. I almost look at Alien as like a Michael Myers in space, tactfully at times creeping through the shadows, stalking like a cat at times, but that's just to me. But I mean, like Jaws, I think the alien design, definitely in the original Alien, is flawed. Yeah, of course. I mean, there's some moments where it definitely looks like a guy in a suit. But, it's late 70s. I guess you could say adds to the charm. But yes, Alien. I mean, one of the greatest sci-fi horror movies ever made. A movie that I love. A movie that has so much rewatchability for me. And of course, next, we will talk about Aliens. A very different movie in some ways. Although I think people lean too far into the whole like, oh, it's an action movie. And yes, it is, but I still think it does have some like definite horror elements to it as well. So yes, let's get into Aliens next. So we fast forward to 1986, of course. So the whole like development for Aliens was definitely an interesting one because a lot of lawsuits were going on from the original movie, lawsuits with just the property just in general. And also just like a lot of skepticism from 20th Century Fox about making a sequel. And if the sequel could be successful, of course, like I said, the original came out in the late 70s. And now it's, we're kind of in the early 80s. And, we're not that used to just sequels being pumped out left and right and being that successful, especially to a movie that is so beloved. So a lot of skepticism there. Of course, Aliens, directed by James Cameron. Now one of the most successful directors ever. Of course, Avatar, Titanic, Terminator 2, the original Terminator, etc., right? But before, Aliens and the whole production and filming started, they were definitely skeptical about having Cameron direct this movie. He was very inexperienced. He had really only directed one movie, which was Piranha 2, not exactly like an Academy Award-winning type of a film and a huge resume, but yeah, had really only one movie under his belt. But when Terminator did come out, shortly below, I believe Terminator, the original, came out a couple years before Aliens. And when that did come out and people saw that it was legitimate and very well done, they knew they had their man. So that kind of got rid of the skepticism that they were having. But there's some interesting things also with Aliens to me. Being a huge history buff that I am, somebody who has studied the Vietnam War extensively, love that kind of stuff, just learning about all of that. It's interesting to think about Aliens as kind of an allegory for the Vietnam War. Of course, Aliens came out well after the Vietnam War had ended, but you've got these soldiers who are essentially veering into the territory of an unknown enemy on their own turf, and kind of shows you very similar to the Vietnam War. We had the most artillery in that war. We had the most firepower. We had more soldiers, but still, it was their home turf, and we didn't know our enemy well enough. And of course, that came to bite us in the ass, just like it did in this movie. So in this movie, a huge time jump in some ways for Ripley. I guess you could say huge, but Ripley is in stasis for 57 years when she's found to start this movie, right? And we start off with Ripley, obviously, dealing with a lot of stress. She's, we're seeing the post-traumatic stress from what had happened in the first movie, which also is kind of a line, you could say, similar to the Vietnam War there, with some of the stuff that the soldiers had been through and whatnot. But now I love that we get to continue Ripley's story. If you're familiar with my channel at all, I love sequels, especially to iconic movies, where we continue that story. Love that. So in this movie, of course, that's great for me. And we see the trauma from Ripley, like I kind of mentioned a second ago, which is interesting. I think that's pulled off well by Cameron. And again, Sigourney Weaver as an actress, she's great. In this movie specifically, she's someone who can come across as being terrified, scared, and mentally almost completely broken in some ways. But at the same time in this movie, you don't really victimize her. She doesn't make herself a victim. You just see her as somebody who's been through some shit, and she's acting in a way that a lot of people would with nightmares and other stuff like that. Of course, in Aliens, we get to see a different side of Ripley as well, like this motherly side to her. You know, when they discovered Newt, she becomes like the person who's going to definitely watch after Newt. That leads me into why a part of me feels like Aliens is such a beloved sequel in so many ways, is because it does what a sequel should do. It builds off of the original movie. It's always hard to follow up an original iconic movie, of course, but it builds off the original movie. It adds lore that people care about. It kind of continues aspects of the story and answers questions in the original story that I feel like people do care about. And we get to see kind of Ripley's character evolving a little bit, not too crazy and not too ridiculous, but just enough where you're starting to get to know her character and like her character even more than you probably already have. I mean, of course, the banter in this movie between the Marines. It's fun as hell. Bill Paxton's in this movie as kind of like the theatrical, ridiculous guy who freaks out about everything, but Paxton does a great job in this movie and is fun as hell. I love that line from Paxton in this movie. He's like, maybe you haven't been keeping up on current events, but we just got our asses kicked, pal. Paxton's fun. He's great in this movie, along with a lot of the other Marines. And like I said, their banter between each other is just fun. And like I kind of hinted on a little bit earlier, this movie is not just an action movie like a lot of people think it is. If you go back and watch the movie again, and when I do, I say to myself, damn, like there are definitely a lot of horror elements to this movie, without a doubt. I mean, specifically like when the Marines are sweeping the compounds and then they come across the cocoons with the humans still in them, definitely some tension in there, definitely horror aspects, without a doubt. I mean, the action of this movie really doesn't kick off until the second half of the movie. The first half is I would say, a horror movie to me. I mean, really with Alien and Aliens, it's kind of the perfect sci-fi mood combo. Just depends on your mood. If you're like in the mood for something that's dark, a little slower paced, a little slower, eerie, of course, an iconic horror movie, watch the first one. If you want to kick things up a notch, have something that's kind of, edited a little quicker, especially in the second half of the movie, you want more action, Aliens, without a doubt. I mean, of course, it's been talked about ad nauseum by a lot of people, but Alien and Aliens couldn't be more different at moments in the movie, but also work together so damn well and is incredible. And I gotta say, like the ending to Aliens, every time I watch it, it still blows me away. I got to get this movie on 4K because it's going to blow my mind even more. I'm not going to lie. But the ending of the movie, like that moment when everything kind of quiets down and then bam, Bishop gets skewered by the Queen and then completely torn in half, and then everything just gets kicked to another level. The set design, the action, the tension, it's incredible. I love it. And of course, like the iconic line from Ripley, "Get away from her, you bitch."
I believe the line is "Stay away from her, you bitch." It's film class, right?
Get away from her, you bitch.
Doesn't get much better than that. And also, I love the fact that they tie in that little nugget from the beginning of the movie about Ripley driving forklifts now. Oh, what a shame. Comes back to save everything, that she has that skill set at the end of the movie. So, love that aspect of it. Aliens, I mean, what else needs to be said? What a great 1-2 combo with both those movies. And then, of course, we fast forward several years later to Alien 3, which came out in 1992. Another director, like, damn, 3 for 3 on very successful directors for the first 3 movies, which is kind of crazy. You very rarely see that in franchises. Yeah, Alien 3 is directed by David Fincher. You might know him from movies like Fight Club, Benjamin Button, The Social Network, and so many other movies. Yeah, what's crazy about Alien 3 is it had about triple the budget of Aliens. And again, like the original Alien, late 70s, Aliens, mid 80s. Now we're jumping to the 90s. So it's going to be a different vibe, right? Things are going to look different. And it definitely does. I do love the fact in Alien 3 that it follows right after Aliens. We just get this 1, 2, 3 combination. You can watch all of them together and continue Ripley's story. I do love that aspect of it. That's great. The movie starts off and it's like, oh, by the way, remember all those people that Ripley tried so hard to save? Yeah, they're all dead. Newt and Hicks, yeah, Dead. Yep. Oh, Bishop too. Yeah, he's completely destroyed. You're like, oh shit. Okay, I guess that's one way to kill off some characters. But, you could say that gives the movie stakes and reminds you what an unforgivable place space travel is, right? So that is, good and bad in some ways. But also, like in Alien 3, to me, it starts this trend where I ask myself, like, okay, like, when the fuck do these chest bursters actually come out? Do they just decide on their own when they want to come out? Is there a timing to it? Is there a gestational period? Like, what's going on here? Because there's started to become these moments in these movies where they come out really quick. There's other moments where they take a long ass time. And in this movie, it takes a long ass time for one of them to come out. So it starts that, and I'm kind of like, that's a little bit weird. But yeah, so throughout this movie, eventually, of course, in Alien 3, we find out that Ripley actually does indeed have an alien inside of her. But this time, it's actually a queen. We get that cool shot, very actually iconic shot in the franchise when the alien goes right up to Ripley's face, but doesn't kill her. Great shot, very memorable, but of course you're like, why? And we find out that's, of course, why. But to me, one of the biggest black eyes to Alien 3 to me is Ripley's character. I think this is by a mile the worst Ripley up to this point in the franchise in the first 3 movies. I mean, that's not even really debatable. I mean, you have one of the greatest protagonists in horror history, in sci-fi history, you could even argue in movie history, and you turn that character into an almost unlikable character in some ways. And in this movie, you don't even really sympathize with Ripley's character, other than the beginning of the movie when she finds out that Newt is dead. And that's, obviously devastating for her. But other than that, she is just not that likable in this movie, which, like I said, is a huge black eye for this movie. And one thing that always sticks out to me as a weird aspect and a weird choice. Alien 3 does have some decent kills. The gore gets turned up a little bit of a notch here, especially over the original Alien in some ways, which is fun. But I will say with Alien 3, I do wish there was more carnage in this movie to kind of make up for the lack of things happening in Alien 3. There's a lot of moments of standing around, wandering around, talking. And I get it. Like, we still have a lot of that stuff in Alien and Aliens, especially in the first half of Aliens. But I don't know. There's something about it that feels like it's important in those first 2 movies. In this movie, it kind of feels like you're just spinning your wheels at moments with characters that you don't really care about in environments that you don't really care about. Yeah, the aspect of, okay, we're on this like prison planet with, 25 people there kind of just watching over the planet, taking care of the, the natural resources that they can. Like, there's something you can do with that, but again, it comes across this movie as one of those, like, at times a weird 90s sci-fi movie that's not totally fleshed out story-wise to me. But yeah, definitely by far, in my opinion, the least interesting environment out of the first 3 movies. I will say, though, like, the set design with this movie is really good. Everything looks really good in this movie. I like those chase sequences, actually, where we're kind of in the POV of the alien. It even kind of spins around on the screen a little bit when the alien's climbing on the walls and stuff, when they're trying to trap them and, shut the different doors. I like that. That's actually kind of fun. But, of course, at the end of Alien 3, not surprising, the corporation wants to save the queen inside of her to use it for their own benefit, right? Not a surprising twist in the story. There's not a lot of surprising twists in Alien 3, especially when you compare it to the first 2 movies, which is full of just interesting surprises and aspects that just make you say, holy shit. In Alien 3, there's not a lot of that. But Ripley at the end of the movie, sacrifices herself for probably the greater good, right? Which, that whole moment where she kind of, does her little Olympic impersonation into the lava, or whatever the hell you want to call it. That's kind of a cool moment. It's got some cool shots. The way it's, pulled off is interesting. Overall, I mean, Alien 3, without a doubt, is a huge drop off from Alien 1 and 2, which is arguably, like I said, one of the greatest 1-2 combinations in movie history in a lot of ways. But anyways, everybody, that's kind of my thoughts on the rise and the fall of Alien 1, 2, and 3. In the end, Alien 3, to me, is the epitome of one of those movies that I will only really watch just to say that I've seen every movie in the franchise. It's not a movie I'll go back and rewatch, whereas the first 2 movies, incredible. Anyways, everybody, Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening to me. Make sure you subscribe to not miss any future content. Go ahead and check out one of these videos next to me if you want some more content from me right now. Thanks again for watching, and I'll talk to you in the next one.